environment. Secondly, this is my third time doing a conference in Germany. I lived in Paris for 4 years in the 1990s, and at that time, the dominant mood in Paris was that France was declining, and that with the move of the capital from Bonn to Berlin, the Franco-German relationship was going to be fundamentally changed. So it's good to be back in Europe. I come back once or twice, at least once or twice every year. First time in this part of Germany, so it's a nice surprise to find that a post-industrial city in Germany, can be so dynamic and young. Okay, so very quickly to talk about environmental governance in the Southeast Asian case. It's not theoretical. I'm trying to build up a case looking at empirics, at what's happening on the ground, to give you a sense of what's been building up. So the problems that people have been facing on environmental governance, and specifically on air pollution, on the air pollution caused by forest fires, and how governments, citizens, civil society groups, and companies have been trying to work together to solve this issue. So I thought it would be in order, to give you a better sense of Southeast Asia, to show you a lot of pictures. So hopefully that will keep everybody awake, and especially me, because I'm starting to feel the jet lag right now. So first of all, talking about regionalism in Southeast Asia. This morning we talked about global governance, and we talked also about regionalism, and whether regionalism could be an alternative if global governance at the level of the globe failed. And I thought it would be interesting to think about what regionalism has meant in Southeast Asia, a part of the world which I think most Europeans, especially those from countries without an Asian colonial history, don't seem to know very well. And of course, the most active and the oldest regional organization in Southeast Asia is ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, which was established actually 50 years ago today, and started 1967, and has since expanded to have 10 member states. So today it's 10 member states, and it might sound small, but actually, small by Asian standards is pretty big when you compare to Europe. It's interesting also because the 10 member states together have a combined population of over 600 million. So in some ways it is bigger in terms of population than the combined European Union population. What's also interesting about this organization, which is not so well known in Europe, is that it, for many ways, was a core of regionalism in the wider Asian region, because Chinese, Japanese, Koreans, couldn't quite trust each other, and we did talk about the trilateral arrangement this morning, but before that came about, ASEAN was basically the small kid on the block that they could trust. So ASEAN actually ended up by default being in the diplomatic forefront, and you can see that in the way ASEAN plays a special role in APEC or in the ASEAN Regional Forum, where big states, China, Russia, and the United States, left it to ASEAN to dictate the pace. And then later on, of course, we have the East Asian Summit from 2005, which was basically ASEAN plus 3. That means ASEAN 10 plus China, Japan, Korea, and 3 other countries, Australia, New Zealand, and India, to form the East Asian Summit. So 16 countries. Don't ask me why they call it East Asian Summit when you actually have Oceania and South Asia. It just sounded nice. It sounded like East Asia Summit encapsulated a certain dynamism, a certain picture of economic growth. And then, it included the US and Russia in 2011. Interestingly, the European Union wants to join the East Asia Summit. It's had doors slammed in its face, so trying to make a case that the European Union makes a political and economic difference to East Asia, but but that argument doesn't quite carry much weight in East Asia. And then finally, Northeast Asia has had some attempts to cooperate between the three major states, but they have not gone so far. So here's a quick map to show you what I'm talking about. It's all very arbitrary as well. We all know regions are constructed. Even the United Nations has very interesting terminology where the Middle East is not the Middle East and the UN is West Asia. And Southeast Asia, this part at the bottom right in orange, this is the region I'm going to concentrate on. To give you some idea of the countries in Southeast Asia and how they're popular, some of you might know Southeast Asia as a holiday destination, famous resorts like Bali and Phuket, resort islands that people go to. So Thailand and Malaysia tend to do very well. Bali is in Indonesia in yellow, but doesn't attract as many tourists. This one is what makes people's eyes water when they see this, the high economic growth rates in Asia. So much so that the more advanced, the richer Southeast Asian countries like Malaysia and Singapore, we have what we consider anemic growth rates. Anything 2% and below is bad. So to have to be a high growth member of this club, you need to achieve at least 5% or above. And a sense of the population size of ASEAN compared to the giants of the world, India, China, and the EU. And a sense of breakdown by countries. Indonesia is by far the largest country in Southeast Asia, the largest by economy, but also far greater than any of the other states in terms of population, with over 250 million people. So if this continues, Indonesia might displace the United States as the third most populous country in the world in another 10 or 20 years. What we do know, of course, is 1997 was an interesting and very important year for Southeast Asia because of a series of crises, the most well-known of which is the financial crisis. That crisis kind of shook Southeast Asia, but not just Southeast Asia, but also other countries in East Asia, South Korea, for example, Hong Kong, countries which had their currencies attacked and had to do a lot of structural reforms in order to get their economies growing again. And there are many reasons for this. I won't go into that. There are people here who are economists who probably would know this much, much better than me. And all I want to say is, here's a chart which tells you what the exchange rate was for Southeast Asian countries. So it was a major financial shake-up for Southeast Asia. But along with 1997, there was also a political crisis and a big change. So many governments were changed. And in Southeast Asia, there were lots of debate about whether to admit or not admit Myanmar or Burma, and whether or not to admit Cambodia, which had a coup. And finally, 1997, which was supposed to be the 30th anniversary of ASEAN, turned out to be our version of the annus horribilis, when everything that could go wrong just went wrong. So remember, 1997 was the 40th year of the Treaty of Rome. It was the 30th year of ASEAN. So ASEAN is kind of 10 years behind the European Union, but in many, many ways is actually much more intergovernmental. Of course, what's important is the impact of the crisis on regional developments, and I would suggest that human rights, democratization in Indonesia, these were some of the effects of that crisis. Some iconic pictures from that era. Most of you would probably not recognize this, but this was a very symbolic picture which was highly controversial. And Suharto, who was the president of Indonesia for over 30 years, fell very quickly after he signed a bailout plan with the IMF, because it was seen as a neo-colonial construct which had come in to control Indonesia again. So this is a big no-no. And the black and white is even worse, when Michel Camdissou, who was the Secretary General of IMF, was looking up and looking very superior. And this went down very badly. And Indonesia entered a period of crisis for about 10 years when there was political and economic instability. I won't focus on these things because they're all very interesting stories and many people have written on them. But this is a story which has not really been told, the environmental crisis in Southeast Asia and how that has resulted in greater cooperation. I think that's a very interesting emerging story, and it's a very important one because it's not just about health, it's not just about regional cooperation, it's also about money and economics and about sustainable development. So this is a very interesting story which in 1997 came to international prominence because people had not seen a forest fire on that scale before. It was so big that the whole region was enveloped by smog for about 2 weeks. And during this time, it was so bad that schools were closed, airports were closed, and people would not go out into the street without a mask. So if you go to some parts of Asia, not just Southeast Asia, today it's become a norm. From Mumbai to Shanghai, some people would go about with masks everywhere on the metro. And in Europe, you'll probably be stopped, right? For being a would-be terrorist. But in some of these countries, it's natural, it's normal because of the high levels of pollution. But nowhere did pollution hit so badly as in Southeast Asia in 1997. And in fact, for the last 20 years, it has come back periodically to haunt countries in Southeast Asia. I didn't put the statistics up, but some people have suggested that in the 2015, the last round of a very bad haze, 100,000 people died in Indonesia due to haze-related problems. This is something the Indonesian government would never admit because it's quite shameful that they don't have the medical wherewithal, but they don't also have the technological and the political will to stop the fires. So I'll go into a little bit into this. And much of it can be traced to deforestation. Southeast Asia is home to some of the biggest tropical forests in the world. Some people call Southeast Asia and the Amazon in Latin America the lungs of the world, where you have very thick forests. But the lungs of the world which are being eroded right now. And here you see from 1990 to 2010, especially look at the graph for Indonesia, the third from the left. These statistics were compiled by a Japanese think tank. And this is the number of forests that is still existing in Indonesia, but it's coming down very rapidly. And if you think about reforestation, there actually are some success stories. Vietnam, for example, is reforest. I don't know what the verb for is reforesting. Okay. But everybody else is losing forests. And my own country, of course, Singapore, is basically a city-state. So the real statistic is 10%. 10% of Singapore has forests. Some more, to give an idea of the global scale, deforestation rates in a 5-year period, Brazil is number 1, or was number 1 at that time. Indonesia was number 2. Now all these are interesting statistics for people, agriculture, maybe who love forests, but they have a real economic and social impact in Southeast Asia. And why is there deforestation? The main reason has been palm oil. The growth of palm oil as an industry, actually since the 1970s, but it really took off in the 1990s because people realized that there were many, many things they could use palm oil for. Making plastics, making food, all kinds of things. And today, there's talk about making palm oil a fuel. So this is one of the main reasons. And this is not an artistic film or picture, but it's actually a real fire that takes place in Indonesia every year. And on very bad years, the smoke will go across boundaries and hit other countries. Kalimantan is the name of a province in Indonesia. It's on the island of Borneo, which is some people consider the largest island in the world. And the rate of deforestation is very high. So this is to give you an idea of how much is being lost to palm oil plantations. It's become so bad that Indonesia and Malaysia, which are the two largest palm oil producers in the world, they have impacted the thinking of other countries in the region. Now, the Philippines wants to go into palm oil as well. They've seen the deforestation and the disasters wrought, but they're also thinking of other ways to make money. So here is a poster of an NGO which is linked to a political party in the southern Philippines, which is campaigning against palm oil. And they're saying there are lots of illegal things going on and we should not support this. This one is interesting. I'll very quickly show you. It's, if I can find it. This is a great infographic produced by an NGO in the Philippines. It gives you, in one infographic, a quick explanation for why this haze exists. And much of it is blamed on slash and burn farming. So instead of cutting the trees down, which they shouldn't in the first place, instead of cutting the trees down to have palm oil plantations, they do the cheapest, most efficient way, which is actually climatically a disastrous way, which is to just slash and burn. And much of the land in these plantations, they're actually peatland. So when you start burning peatlands, it actually releases a lot of carbon dioxide. So the carbon footprint of palm oil is actually very, very high. And it took more than 20 years of palm oil plantation before pressure started mounting on governments and corporations to do something about this. So palm oil is found in so many products, shampoo, biscuits, and consumer groups in Southeast Asia are now campaigning for governments to have legislation to restrict the amount of palm oil that can be found in certain products. Okay. So this poster came out in 2015. This was actually the worst we had on record, where the pollution standard index went into the hazardous range for a number of days for in at least 3 or 4 countries. So you can see the countries affected: Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, and the Philippines. So a kind of, I don't know how else to describe it, kind of a Chernobyl thing, but it happens every year. Okay, and it's also made worse by dry conditions like the El Nino effect. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that it's not going to happen again this year, because most of us, when we think about July, August in Southeast Asia, we remember, was there a haze or was there not a haze? So remember that time the haze, the PSI hit 400 or 500. It's become normal for us. Okay. What's interesting thing is that there's now international cooperation, not just within ASEAN. You can see that on the left. Australia, Malaysia, Singapore, China, Russia, and South Korea. I think Japan was not named, but Japan is also very actively involved in monitoring the haze, offering technology, expertise to fight fires, but also to suggest alternatives to palm oil. Because palm oil has become such a major commodity and a cash commodity for at least 2, if not 3 other countries. Okay, now let me quickly go back to the PowerPoint and hopefully finish up. so through all this, I mean, you're wondering, 97 was the first big haze, where, of course we were distracted by economic and political crises. 97 to now is 20 years, and what have we learned? And if you're a tourist or you're from outside the region, you're wondering, why should I go and have a holiday, a summer in Southeast Asia when there's going to be a haze problem? Actually, a lot of things have happened. One of them is the HAZE agreement, which is 2003, was agreed to by 10 countries in Southeast Asia. It took a while, a lot of foot dragging, because as you can expect, a lot of politicians and corporations in Malaysia and Indonesia depend on palm oil. So they were not going to go into an agreement which would affect their livelihood. What's interesting is that because the haze came back with a vengeance in the last few years, 2013 and 2015, some governments, including the Singapore government, have decided enough is enough. So they've started enacting extraterritorial legislation, which is to have legislation that would enable the Singapore government to fine foreign companies that are found to be behind the haze. So very controversial again, but because many companies from Indonesia and Malaysia have headquarters or are listed in the stock market of Singapore, they can be fined. So that's one of the ways. But what's interesting is the coordination and cooperation at all these different levels, NGOs, corporations, and governments. I want to focus on especially the RSPO, the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil, which is something between companies actually, and NGOs such as Greenpeace and the World Wildlife Foundation have blown the whistle on companies which claim to have sustainable practices but actually do not on the ground. Some of these are big European companies. So Unilever and Nestle were exposed around 2010 and 11. Huge public relations disaster for them. And they joined the RSPO. But of course, the big MNCs at the top depend on smaller landholders and farmers to do the palm oil collection. What's interesting too is up to this year, the EU has had a resolution to talk about biodiesel, and I'm not sure what the EU has decided, but the EU also is responsible for some of the demand for palm oil. Okay, I'm going to finish up in a moment. So. So that's where we are right now. Okay, the many initiatives going on the ground, many efforts by all kinds of citizens and civil society groups working locally and across boundaries and working with partners outside the region to try and put a stop to this. Okay, I think I better end here.
Thank you, Professor Wong.